I did a web development project for Cryobiology Incorporated. I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit of background about cryobiology. It's a cryogenics lab based in Columbus, Ohio. It's a very small company with only 5 employees. Even though they do have some of their systems in electronic format, currently they're running 2 systems. They're running also a paper-based system. They're not using their electronic format at all for their day-to-day operations, so it's just something they have, but they're not using. And they only have 1 email address for the entire company. This email address is checked by 1 employee, and not even weekly. It was checked twice a week, or twice every couple weeks, once a month, not on a regular basis at all. My original objectives in this project was, number 1, to create a web presence for cryobiology. They didn't have anything online. In fact, they had trouble sending email. They had trouble getting online, so they really didn't know too much about it in the beginning. Based on the nature of their business, they have a donor catalog, and they wanted to incorporate a donor search option into their database, into their website. And they wanted users to get onto their website based on search criteria that people enter, come up with a list of prospective donors so people could learn more about donors that they have available for their use. They wanted to give those users the ability to download those donor profiles and medical histories online. The donor profiles were 1 page. Originally, they wanted to charge everybody $1 a page to view the donor profiles online, and they wanted to make available 10 to 12-page medical histories. These are more in-depth look at the donor. Originally, those were $10 a page, or a medical history. Because cryobiology is so small and they really don't have a web presence, and they're not really technologically oriented, in the beginning we figured to use a portal for e-commerce capability. Doing transactions of $10 and $1, that's not really big volume, and it wouldn't be essential for them to do it. So we thought that taking care of the credit card and everything and the security, that a web portal probably would be the best idea. And another thing that cryobiology wanted to do in the beginning was they wanted to make 9 free profiles for each user and 1 medical history available. That means when you log in into the system, you'd be allotted 9 free and 1 free of medical history. Of course, you'd have to keep track of it somehow, and they wanted to implement some kind of a login feature. Some technical issues I found was when I began this project, they currently had 2 different profiles designs. That means you could order at $1 each 2 different profiles for 2 different donors and get 2 different layouts. So if you're trying to sit there and compare them, if they look differently, then you would have no criteria to compare them on. So that was definitely a problem. Another problem they had was their medical histories. They have a unique feature to them. They wanted to keep the handwriting of the donor on them. Currently, when someone ordered a medical history, they got a copy of the original form that the donor had filled out. So it had their English skills, the way they punctuated, and their handwriting. And cryobiology approached me and said, we want to scan these in. And what they told me was they had this little tiny desktop scanner, and they wanted to scan 10 to 12 pages for over 100 donors. And every time they'd get a new donor, they'd have to go and do these 12 pages. And really, that's not a feasible option for someone to sit there and do, for the volume. And also, storage space. They don't have the server, so they're going to have to get an ISP, and to pay for such a storage space, that's just crazy. Some design issues. Their data was stored in a FileMaker database, which, when I started this project, I had no idea what that was. I had to learn about what it was, and unfortunately, theirs was in an older version of FrontPage that's no longer even supported by web development. So that was a severe issue that I came across. But what really surprised me and really took me back and taught me a lot, actually, was that their data was set up in 1 table. When they faxed me their table, it was 24 pages long and had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fields. And that was their database, 1 table. Now, to implement a search feature based on this 1 table, users would have to sit there for maybe 10 minutes just to get a search. People aren't going to sit around and wait online, so something definitely had to be done if that was going to be implemented. We decided to restructure the database. Microsoft Access was chosen for it, and there's a couple reasons why. Number 1, they would have to maintain it themselves, and since they really aren't too technologically oriented, we had to get something simple. They already had Microsoft Word and Excel, so it was compatible. We wanted to keep it consistent for them, and they really didn't have a need for a huge database. They only have 100, give or take a little, donors at one time, so they didn't need too much room. A primary key was easy for them. They had a donor ID for each one already. They're unique, so that was easy to make a donor primary key for them. Even though their data was in one table, they did have it grouped. So it was easy to separate into different tables. And I was also able to use a comma delimited format to change all the data from FileMaker to Access. So that made it easier too. Here's an example of a part of the profile tables that I made up. As you can see, they're separated into the different possible problems they could have. This is part of the medical history part. But when the original database, they had not only one field for like ulcer, they'd only had one field. They had like 5. They had ulcer for mother, ulcer for father. I mean, it went crazy with fields, and it was nuts. So the way we decided to change this was just put it once and then add a comment field to say what it was for. So we eliminated most of the records that we needed, and that drastically reduced the database size. For the final prototype, it was decided to change the original objectives and to only include the short donor profiles online. Since it was so important for them to keep the handwriting option, we decided that right now that maybe we should just include the short donor profiles. And if people want to order the medical histories, then they could call in or email in. We'll direct them to the contact information to do so. Then we came to the problem, though. Here we have donor profiles only. They're $1 a page. You get 9 free. So is it really feasible to implement an e-commerce capability to a site for $1 a transaction? And then in talking to them, I found out that people rarely even order them. They usually took the 9 and that's it. So we just dropped the e-commerce altogether, and they decided to make all the profiles free because